Hello and welcome to another edition of Spoiled Games. I'm Adam Sessler. We are once again revisiting a classic, a cult classic. It's going to be Shadow of the Colossus. Many years old, originally released on the PS2 with an HD upgrade for the PlayStation 3. Before we get to it though, there's a reason the show is called Spoiled Games. We are talking about everything. We are spoiling the game. The beginning, the middle, and of course the end will be discussed. If you have not played it, this is a game you need to play. It's part of video game vernacular. Go play it. We'll still be here. You come back, you hit play again. But for everyone else, this should be very, very exciting, not the least of which why is because of our panel of Rev3 Games. Tara Long, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
And of D-News, Rev3 Games, and anything else that involves things here, Anthony Carboni.
I wash the dishes mostly.
Yes, and thank you for that. So, Shadow of the Colossus, I had played it all these years ago and remember it with both fondness and frustration.
Yes.
I know it's a favorite of yours, Anthony.
One of my favorites of all time, and I think there's a little bit of frustration there, but I think it's mostly built in on purpose. And we can talk a little bit more about that. I know I'm not in a popular school of thought when I say that.
No. I've come to think that myself, especially on this playthrough. Now, Tara, this was your first time.
Yes.
You were aware of kind of the, I guess I want to say cult that surrounds the game.
I had no clue about this game whatsoever, never owned a PS2, so I got the re-release on PS3. I've literally never seen footage of this game before I played it.
I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous of you doing this.
I had no idea what to expect, and people have been talking about this like for centuries, it seems like. But I went in completely blind, and I have, I have some mixed thoughts. I feel like a lot of the affinity for the game is because of nostalgia. But there are also a lot of really great ththings there that I'm sure we're going to discuss.
Well, and I think the thing that's most striking, I would love to hear your thoughts since you have a 0-level reading on it, which is such a valuable, I want to study you right now. It does not do what you expect from most games. And one of it is its unwillingness until probably the very, very end of the game to really tell a story. I mean, it just kind of sets things up, and then all of a sudden all narration is just kind of, it just evaporates, and you're just wandering around with a horse killing colossi.
Yeah, and I've gone back to read some of the reviews after I finished it to see what other people thought of it, and I was actually kind of surprised by how well received the story was, because I feel like it was practically non-existent. Like, for the first, 80% of the game, all you have to go on is, oh, here's this girl, and she's dead or something. I want to bring her back. Okay, we'll kill these 16 rock monsters. Like, that's the whole story for the first 80% of the game.
Well, but I think that's what's so brilliant about it, right? Is it plays around. Like at the time, we were going through a very big transition in games and the way game storytelling was happening and things like that. And this is it's set up like such an archetypal video game. The princess is in a tower. Get 16 things and bring them back, and there's the princess. And it just plays off of that so much by giving you no information until the very end. It's so vague about everything that you forget that in the beginning, they pretty much tell you you're kind of the bad guy. Like, you kind of did something really, really wrong.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to be there.
You're not supposed to be there.
You're in a forbidden land. I mean, they
supposed to take this
such
girl.
vague terms.
You're not supposed to wake up this guy. You're not supposed to have this sword. And then they set you free, and you forget about that entirely. And it just becomes another video game where you kind of lead yourself to believe, just like the character is doing, I'm the good guy. I'm saving this girl. I got to stop these monsters. And at the end, it's like, no. Remember that you're an asshole.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
remember that.
The mystery is a lot of what appeals to people about it, like sort of inventing in your mind what is not spoken.
Yeah.
So in that regard, I can see it. And the game does cultivate a very good sense of solitude, which I enjoyed.
That really struck me, and I was wondering if that would carry over. We've seen sort of like a lot of games expand. Limbo is like one of the ones that comes to mind that are so quiet. But I mean, Shadow of the Colossus is quiet. Obviously, it orally, but that sense of scope, which still maintains itself, which is quite impressive because this was on the PS2. That when it's that quiet and there's just you can see how there's nothing that's going to make a sound between where you are and where you're trying to go. That it's not so much lonely as it is contemplative.
Yeah, it was a super brave choice too, right? Because you have this brilliant guy who did the score, who did a lot of anime and movie scores. He's the guy who did like Gundam Wing and Gundam Wing Endless Waltz and Outlaw Star, like stuff that's known for its score. And when the music kicks in, it's some of the most beautiful music in video games. But like the fact that this game just leaves you alone for so long to be like, I'm gonna take 10 minutes and ride over to this rock and see what's up with this
Yeah.
rock. This is a cool rock.
I
there's nothing on it. Okay.
I like games that are sort of like modularly organized because I like being able to know exactly how far through a game I am. So I think that played off of that really well. Like I'm glad that they didn't try to pad the more open environments with a bunch of like low-level enemies or something.
Or
I feel
side
like that
quests
would've-
or something.
Or
yeah.
any
that
enemies
would've
at all,
just
right?
Totally detracted from the Colossi.
I mean, even something as simple as the salamanders, the white-tailed salamanders. You know, I love how they have the black salamanders, and it's not they could have just had a white salamander to say, "I am a different salamander.
Yeah.
Find me novel." No, it's just the tail,
Yeah.
and they never let you know. You have to find out by yourself or from a kid on the schoolyard. Kill it, eat it. Now you have a little more grip.
Yeah.
You have to pay attention, and it's the same thing with the trees. Like there is a tree in the middle of nowhere that looks a little bit different than other trees, and you just have to be the sort of person that's like, I'm gonna try stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't get that enough in games anymore. You don't get that to the point where it's like, I'm just gonna walk up to this tree and I'm gonna shoot at that fruit. Why? Because it looks different. It's a different color. I wonder what'll happen.
It is a game for curious and inquisitive people.
Yeah, and here's the question I can't seem to answer is, was this that unique back when it was released, or did we have that sense where the expectation was the player was well-versed enough in games that you didn't need to over-explain how they're supposed to interact with it, or was Shadow of the Colossus even sort of that remarkable back then?
Well, I think there are two things going on, and I think number one is just how checkpoint to checkpoint we've gotten since then. So that is part of it. Is like now we're at such a point where like games tell you right from the start, you're going here, you're doing this, this is what's next. And it's become more that way since Shadow of the Colossus. I think the trend has only been to make it easier for people to get into things. But even back then, I can only name off, I think, a few games that would really let you wander in that way. I mean, you had like some early PC spacefaring sims that would just let you fly around in darkness for like ever. Thinking about those, thinking about things like maybe like Beyond Oasis or Tale of the Sun, things where it's just like go explore. Or biggest comparison for me, the original Zelda.
Yes.
This game is so much like the original Zelda to me, more so than any other Zelda game has even been since.
I mean, that's what I was thinking about. It was you had to talk to someone down the schoolyard. Like it was probably weeks of owning Zelda before I realized there were dungeons. It never says, "Hey, there's actually a point to what's going on." But it's kind of with that in mind that I can't decide if certain things, and we were just discussing this, that I would term a flaw in the game, that was especially criticized now if it was released now, was something that was through the limitations of the designers, or was actually put in there because they didn't want a perfect experience. You know, the horse, the camera, the way you grip. I mean, everything feels a little rough around the edges, but I'm almost tempted to say that's on purpose.
I feel like part of that was probably the technical limitations. I know like a lot of the motion blur was put in there to help out with the low frame rate. Which
Though the
makes
motion
sense.
blur still looks really good.
It
in
does
HD.
look good.
Yeah.
It does look good. The horse, I don't think that was like I felt like that was more of a design flaw than anything. Like just poor controls, poor like.
So they've gone on record, like they have said, Ueda said, we did not make the horse respond to control 100%. So whether he means this or not, who knows? He's a cryptic dude, but like he said, no, that's a real animal. Sometimes you call and it doesn't come.
Exactly, and actually, I feel like it was frustrating for me, especially playing games in the modern age when I'm like, I shouldn't have to deal with this shit, like. But when you control it, it actually does sort of feel like you are controlling a horse. Like it's not going to be like a one-to-one movement.
Yeah, it does have a brain. It is much stronger than you, and it can kind of assert its will.
Well, you think about it in terms of modern games now. If you were riding a horse, this would kind of be general movement, but moving the camera would also change the direction of the horse. Like we're just used to that now. Things that make it easier to navigate. And this is very much like, no, this is a separate entity. This is the camera, and these are the reins. And this horse is going to listen to what you do on these reins. So be really careful with them. But I think a lot of these imperfections are in there like that on purpose. When you look at the protagonist, like we were talking about, like when you do a dive roll with him, he dives and he rolls and he stumbles every time. You know, when you look at the way he swings his sword, like that's a stolen sword, right? When he swings, he's like, ugh.
It's too dangerous.
His running at, like he's good with a bow, but you're supposed to get the feeling that this kid should not be here and is out of his league. And I think that does come into some of the problems with climbing too. Although some people just think the climbing is broken, and I get where they're coming from too.
Yeah, I go back and forth. But before we get to that, but with the idea, by their own admission, that they made the horse less than perfect. It was a design choice. That they're so particular at a granular level that I can't think of anything equivalent to that. But then the world that you're in is so deliberately vague.
Yeah.
That it isn't, both in just sort of how it's visually made, and that they just don't explain anything. I mean, it starts to make the game all the more fascinating that they don't want to like color everything in between the lines. You know, that you have to start inferring things, and they just won't go that extra step and say, it's all about this.
Yeah, I did think when they finally do introduce that one cutscene where you see the masked guys,
Yes.
and I think it's after the 13th Colossus.
It's pretty far in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did seem a little bit abrupt
I
to me.
feel the same way.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, suddenly there's a story now?
Well, it's
13 Colossi in?
It's that reminder, right? You're
But
getting
like,
close
why
to
not
the end of the
pepper
game.
them in, you know, like every
Because
3 or 4?
I think if you peppered them in, you wouldn't get that feeling that we talked about before, where you are this hero and you are just kind of trying to save somebody, and you are just kind of running around and figuring things out for yourself. For there to be like guys chasing you at every turn, I think would just be too constant a reminder of the ambiguity that it would just get rid of the ambiguity.
But it still struck me as strangely jarring, and maybe this is also because I had played Eco before I played Shadow. It was available earlier. I love that game, and that game is closer almost to the Half-Life model, where it's like, we're never going to fill in the blanks for you. You know, it's, you know, we have enough information there. You're just going to figure it out for yourself, and there's all the narrative restraint you can expect. And I kind of got lulled into that, and I think I was, you know, imposing that experience onto Shadow, so that when they show up with the mask, it's like, hold on, so someone is in control, someone does know better what's going on in the game, and you know, it was a nice introduction. You were lulled into it, but I also started to get frustrated because they're taking some of that responsibility away from me, and I was kind of enjoying that.
Yeah, I can totally see that. But even then, I think that the ambiguity that they gave you throughout the rest of the game makes even this standard cutscene of like, here's the evil wizard and he found you and he's got knights and they're gonna get you. Like, there's this idea where like, well, who is Iman? Like, why am I not allowed to get here? Because you're running around in this land, right, that is so ambiguous. And it is so, like, it's pretty, right? Like, you go into these forests and it's pretty, and there are all these birds around and lizards and turtles and stuff. And it doesn't feel like a forbidden place. It doesn't feel like a cursed place.
Do the Colossi feel menacing or evil?
Some.
I mean, most of them seem so forlorn that you're almost taking them out of their misery. I mean, it's interesting how that plays into the end, where they were probably kind of tricking you into releasing their evilness into one big evil thing.
Yeah, the ones that charge you, I feel like, are more menacing than the big ones that walk like
What was your
really
favorite?
slow. My favorite were pretty much all the flying ones and the swimming ones. So I really liked the dragon. I really liked the flying sandworm. I really liked probably my favorite was the underwater eel, because it was just like something about the environment there combined with the music was just like a very emotional.
The grabbing and holding on probably felt the most kind of tense.
Yeah,
that you knew there was a
like
big
the water
object.
resistance or something.
I think the eagle or the dragon and the eel boss, like they feel very much the same that way. Like, those are the two where I really just feel like, this thing is giant. This thing is so much more powerful than me. Like, what am I, you know what I mean? And those are the ones too where, like, if you fall off the eagle or you let go of the eel, you got a while before you can get back into the battle.
Yeah, I know. Otherwise, you can fall on rock and you won't even die.
My first playthrough, this is years and years ago, that eagle one was the bane of my existence, because your punishment was not death, it was swimming all the way back to the platform. And the camera in that one, I must say, the HD update grade, what they allow with the camera makes life so much easier.
Yeah, it's funny when you talk about nostalgia. Adam and I were talking about this. I remember the lock-on always being there, but it wasn't. That lock-on to Colossus.
Yeah, you blocked it out of your mind.
I blocked it out of my memory. As far as I'm concerned, I had no problems. No, but I had a lot of problems. But here's the thing. So, like, you look at these Colossi and the way they're designed, and you look at kind of like these imperfections. And one of the things that comes to my mind, where it's like, well, did they design this as perfectly, or was it just kind of full of flaws, and your memory and your imagination are filling in the gaps? The Colossus 12 with the control stones on his head, and he starts off in the lake. and you have to swim under his armpit to get around behind him. In the original game, like, I remember in the original game, because the camera glitched so badly as you were trying to do that, that I must have spent like an hour and a half just going like, no, I have it wrong. I don't have the right strategy. I clearly can't go under there. And that they did not fix that in this one.
They did not.
They did not fix that. So maybe it was a design choice.
I mean, the idea that, okay, as you pointed out, Tara, you know, they're not side quests. The best you get is I'm going to find myself a salamander or a piece of fruit. And so the game really is in those moments with the Colossi. And if the grip was too easy, if it was too easy to control, this game would have been over in a heartbeat. And that, like, you want to spend that time, you want to not make it, or it's not like you, the player, want that, but the game, you shouldn't be able to do it on the first try.
Yes.
You know, those moments. And like, I loved, I think, the really big Colossi where at some point you've got to let go and just hope that you're going to be able to stabilize and get your grip meter back up. Those are some of the most delicious moments in the game because nothing's telling you to do it. You just kind of have to go by intuition and like, okay, I think I'm onto this. It might be the closest you are to being put into the mindset of the character you are controlling.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing playing it now because you are very tempted to look up walkthroughs as you're playing.
I have to.
Even you told me, like, don't even bother not looking up a walkthrough. Like, you're gonna need it. But like the whole thing about having a game comprised entirely of boss fights, which normally are my least favorite parts of games, is just the risk of losing that investment that you've made. You know what I mean? Like, you've already put 20 minutes into trying to take this guy down, and you're so, and that's why the game is so great at building tension, because you're so vested already in what you've done. You don't want to lose all of that progress.
You don't have to walk all the way back there because you decided to shut down for the evening.
Well, even the smallest mistakes, right? Like going back to the eagle. If you fall off the eagle's back, and like I noticed during the eagle, like towards the end of it, I was just like this, and my heart was racing, because if you fall off that wing, music's quiet, you're in the middle of nowhere again. You've got like a 3-minute swim.
Then you got to get
enjoy yourself.
It's fascinating.
But it plays with that a lot. It plays with all this empty space so much in a way that's like braver than any other game I've seen since. If you even think about Colossus 15, the last Warrior Colossus, you're walking through that arena, and it just gives you like 5 minutes walking down the hallway of this arena. Just chill.
And
you know it's coming.
For you.
But this world is big, and you got a long way to go. And I love that it will do that, and it will allow you to do that.
Well, and with the Colossi, granted, it's one of the smaller ones. It's when you're in kind of a coliseum with the multi-levels, and it's climbing along the sides. There's this wonderful balance of risk to reward that the further away you are, you know, you're trying to get that perfect arrow shot. If you can get it when it's really high up and you somehow manage to get down, he's going to fall faster. You're going to be done with it. It is so much harder than the easier route that takes forever. Which is, I'm going to get as close to him as possible, but he's going to fall only a short distance. We're going to have to rinse and repeat, and that's going to open up so many more opportunities for these deadly shots, because that's probably one of the most menacing of the Colossi there. Like about 2 attacks and you're toast.
But it's interesting though, because even there is where I get these feelings that the traversal, for as buggy as it seems when you get started, is very, very deliberate in a lot of ways, because by the time I got to that Coliseum, I was like, all right, it's a long way down, but I know exactly where to grip. I know how far, I know where to grab a ledge and drop. And I could get down the entire length of that Coliseum in like 5 to 7 seconds. And it's the same way. That's why I think they don't give you they don't give you giant, burly, dude-looking Colossi for a while towards the end there, because you get so good at climbing. And I think if it was as glitchy as people think when they initially start playing, you would not get better at climbing. You would still be just as angry in the beginning.
I still suck at climbing.
Do you really?
Yeah, like when you're trying to climb up a narrow part where it's like if you're too far to the left, you can't jump up to the next ledge. That kind of stuff really puts me off in games.
There were points where you get caught in like a shoulder joint or something, and there's clearly just like no algorithm there. It's the same thing as when he gets caught in a corner on a building, and you're like, oh, they just don't have any corner crawling. Like, they just don't have that. I just can't get from here to here because it's on a corner, and they didn't put that animation in there. So I think, some of that stuff is missing, but at the same time, like, there's a lot of stuff in that game it's interesting to have had you play it now, because I think there's a lot of stuff in that game that we take for granted now, in terms of systems. And in terms, like, the first time I rode through that world, and I didn't touch a loading screen from Temple to Colossus, like, we take that for granted now, and we expect worlds much bigger than that.
Screens. I mean, it's, no, you don't hit a loading screen in that.
Well, there's nothing there to take up space.
That's true, but I mean, if you just keep saying to yourself, remember this was the PS2.
Yeah.
Like, you're just like, this was big, and there's things in the background.
Yeah.
And although you can see, the one thing that I will say is you can see a lot of their tricks in the HD version, because this is an HD re-release, it's not a remake.
Yeah,
you
by
know?
any means.
So the little tricks they used to use where they use bitmaps for a temple in the distance, just to make it clear to you that there's a temple there, or a giant bitmap of a fruit tree. Like, and when you get up to the fruit tree is very small, but it's like just giving you this little signal because it thinks that you're on this
It needs
TV.
to give you some point of interest. And also, the fidelity of the game when it was on the PS2 was far inferior to what you can play now. That, you know, what we're seeing is kind of an obvious big tree was less obvious, but we knew that there was something to keep our eyes on out there in the distance. Let's get now to the ending of the game, which I still am so ambivalent about, in part because of the intrusion of narrative at the end. And then it's, you know, suddenly, okay, you actually have been a bad guy, you've been completely fooled, you've released evil, evil is now here, and now you are evil beast creature. I've gone back. It's a fascinating way for the story to go, especially when you compare it against Japanese games. It's very Japanese in the, we're just going to kind of build on a linear narrative and not necessarily reincorporate aspects from the earlier part, but it goes in such a dark direction that it still throws me off, even though I anticipated it. Tara, for you, having not played it before, how did you respond to that?
I actually really, really liked the ending, partially because I knew, like, based on what I'd read about the game, I knew that there was like an emotional story to be had somewhere within it. And by the time I got to the end, I was like, okay, well, this is it. So I was sort of expecting it, right? I thought it was really well done. I like how they, like, even though they reveal a lot more information, it's still sort of nebulous.
Very.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're right. It was very Japanese.
Well, but I think that's the thing is you know, once again, if you go back to that theory of they're playing with what an archetypal game is at this point in time. Did you unleash it? Did you unleash an evil? Like, half of those colossi we just said didn't seem pretty evil. Like, I stabbed a colossus in the head and I felt pretty bad.
And you have freaky guys in masks that, and, you know, if you've watched probably any horror movie from the past 5 years, those will come across as the bad guys.
Yeah,
those guys sacrificed a girl. We know that.
She was cursed.
Was she? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
The land is supposedly cursed. I don't know. I played with a turtle for 15 minutes. It was dope. So these guys come in, and they're wearing their masks, and you're dead, and you're evil, and you have an evil demon inside of you. And you release it, and he's kind of just like, man, I'm so mad at you for putting me in here, and I borrowed this guy's body. Like, he uses the word borrowed.
Yeah.
I am returning this body to this kid when I am done with it. I just need it right now. Whereas, like, these guys come in and they're using the words like evil and must be destroyed and this has to finish. Whereas, like, Dorman seems like a dude who's just like, all right, cool. Now I'm in my land. No one else is here. I'm just going to do my Dorman thing.
Yeah.
You know?
And then, you know, you have the temple, you know, there's a garden up top, you know, he's kind of reborn, and you almost are getting, I want to go so far as to say it's Shinto, because I'm not so well versed in that type of mythology, but you do, almost like a Miyazaki film, there's a sense that there's nature, and there's something has been pure and protected, and there's a rebirth happening there, and to your point that these men who came are the intrusion of the modern, of sort of man's mucking about and things, and that it was forbidden insofar as the only way to keep it safe was to keep mankind out.
There's a lot of biblical stuff going on. There's a lot of, you know, Japanese game designers like to play with Judeo-Christian imagery a lot.
Yes.
And you know,
Bayonetta.
Yeah.
Probably the most irreverent take on
just is like, whatever, cool.
On the Bible I've ever seen.
There you go, with the guns and the stuff. So, I mean, you look at from the beginning, you've got Dorman, who, backwards, Nimrod, who is the biblical king who created the Tower of Babel, this giant tower you're in, and just had the best of intentions with the Tower of Babel. And after he died, they split up his body into 16 pieces. right?
Yeah,
Up at the top,
yes,
up at the
right.
top, up at the top of this, you've got this garden with apple trees, the first apple trees we've seen. You become a baby again. It's
Yeah.
one guy. Well, yeah, like it's all just very like this seems like it's a good place.
Yeah.
This seems like it's a good place, and we're being thrown these archetypes, and we're being asked to question them.
Well, and to your point, the only times that the words evil and all that are spoken are by the men who intrude. That they are bringing their kind of viewpoint. And if you think about sort of a natural system, and this I do understand about sort of Shinto, there is no concept of good or evil. It's nature. Nature wins.
Yeah.
And it's how you kind of play with it that's going to have a lot more to do with your survival than trying to impose some kind of taxonomy and favor one aspect over another.
Yeah. And so that's why I kind of love the ambiguousness of it, and I don't mind that all of a sudden you kill Colossus 13 and all this stuff comes in, because I love that they've just kind of set you up in such a way where you can question these standard cutscenes that are about to happen.
Yeah.
I'm liking it more now that we've had this discussion. I think I'm becoming a little bit more comfortable with it. But it is a game that I think would be most frustrating to have played and have had no one to talk about it with.
Which happened to a lot of people when it
Yeah.
came out, because this is not a game that has a lot of outward appeal.
Yeah,
and this
you
is
can't rush through it either.
This is a game where when people tell me I didn't like this game, inside I fume a lot and I think about whether I like them. Yeah, but
See, but
outwardly, I understand.
When I started playing it, I told you I didn't like it, and then it really grew on me over the course of the game.
Yeah. And I think it's because of that. It's just kind of like, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm just this dude on this stupid horse, and I don't know what's going on. And if you don't have somebody to tell you, shoot a fruit tree. Like, I had people telling me, I was live tweeting as I was replaying, and I had people who played the game when it came out on the PS2, and they're like, there are lizards in that game.
Oh, I know.
There's salad, like you can shoot fruit in that game. It's so ambiguous that I think they might have overstepped in a lot of ways, and just so many people on original
Let that
release.
pendulum, swing that far.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. This game was published by Sony. Sony is not a small company, Nonetheless, you have someone like Shu Yoshida, who's been running creative there for so long, that's willing to invest in something that on paper and in practice will not be a commercial success. But it is such a remarkable experiment, and for all of its flaws, I think there's such a sense of benefit of just seeing what happens when you go in that direction. That it's hard not to just sort of laud the insane corporate daring that's behind
Well, there's
it.
something to be said for just kind of looking and being like, this is one that 10 years from now, people will know us for and will feel good about. This is like a good step forward for the entire medium in a lot of ways.
And maybe one day we will have this very same discussion about The Last Guardian.
Should be out any day now, right?
Yeah,
It's
I would have to say.
almost done, right?
Now, if that does happen, we will be talking about it on Spoiled Games. Let's be frank, it's not going to happen for a while. So go play some other games that we've covered on this show. You should be able to find all of the past episodes right where you are watching it right now, and check those out. I'd like to thank our panel yet again, Tara Long,
Thank you.
Anthony Carboni. We will be back talking about more games. So in the meantime, go play some.
Just keep the faith, Internet. Last Guardian's any day now.